yeah, like maybe I shouldn't have read the last 150 pages of this book at my place of employment. Well, there's really no end to that sentence, is there? Hello guys, it is Michaela back again, and I'm doing another book review this time because about, what time is it? I don't even know. About 5 hours ago, we'll say, I finished reading my 5th book of the year, and holy crap, did it blow my mind. I just started reading it last night. I read actually about 200 pages of it last night, and then I finished it up today while I was at work. Please don't tell on me. And the reason that I read it so fast was because I had to know what was going to happen next. I wouldn't call it an action-packed book. It's not slow by any means, but it's also not like bam, 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 you know what I mean? I don't know why I haven't told you what it is yet. The book is Together We Caught Fire by Eva V. Gibson. This book is insane, and I love it. Okay, how to describe this book without giving it away? This book is about an 18-year-old girl named Lane, whose father just married the mother of her longtime hardcore crush, this guy in her school named Gray, who also happens to be dating her, like, I guess, best friend. The relationship between her and the best friend, Sadie, is tenuous but strong, which is a contradiction in terms, but I feel like you understand what I'm talking about. So now Lane is living every day side by side in the same house with a guy she's been in love with for years, and she doesn't really know how to deal with that, especially when she starts to suspect that maybe, perhaps, Gray, her now stepbrother, might have feelings for her too. At the same time, she's getting very close with Sadie's older brother, Connor, who's an artist. It's a very artistic book, like full of artistic people, and I actually really liked that. So Lane starts having this thing with Connor, but then she's also living with Gray, and the tension between the two of them is ramping up as the book progresses. And I'm not gonna say anything more on that point because that's kind of what you get from the back of the book. So that's really all I want to say, because this book takes you in wild directions. I am hesitant to call this book a mess because I feel like when we say that like something is a mess, we mean even if we like it, there is a sense that it's also like kind of not good, and that is not the case here, but it is kind of a mess. Before I talk too much more about this, I should also acknowledge that this book comes with a lot of trigger warnings. It delves into some really serious, really dark, really kind of scary topics. So I'm actually going to read from the, I don't know if you can see this, from the trigger warning type thing at the beginning of the book, just so you can kind of know what you're getting into. The story contains content that might be troubling to some readers, including but not limited to depictions of and references to death, suicide, cutting and self-harm, vivid nightmare imagery, substance abuse, homelessness, childhood trauma, and PTSD. I'm not going to be delving into any of these topics with any kind of seriousness in this review, but that is something that you're going to want to keep in mind when you're reading this, if you decide to read this, or if you don't, that's really cool. Take care of yourself. So something to know about me as a reader is that I hate love triangles. I don't think they're ever particularly done well, and even the ones that are done well, I usually find myself preferring when the plot goes to something else. Like, a love triangle can be fine if it's sort of like the C or D plot, but I think we all know that in YA, love triangles are very rarely the C or D plots, are usually the A plot, and I just find them boring, and I don't really care. I don't typically care who the protagonist ends up with, or if I do care, like, there's one of the two love interests that I definitely prefer over the other. Inevitably, that's not the one that the protagonist picks, so I'm always disappointed. So I hate love triangles. Let's do without them. Saying that this book has a love triangle feels like it's not enough. Like, it feels like not the right term, even though it's technically true. Like, there are two people vying for and capturing Lane, the protagonist's attention, Gray and Connor, Sadie's brother. But what this love triangle-esque thing does so well personally find that whenever there's a love triangle in YA, you can pretty much tell from the beginning, like, where it's gonna go. Like, you can always, or almost always, say, like, yeah, the protagonist is gonna end up with this one. This other one is there for a teaser and, you know, to, like, ratchet up the emotional tension or whatever. But, like, you know who the protagonist is gonna end up with. And whether or not it's the person you like, there you are. And I thought the same was going to be true for this one. I thought, even though I was really engaged with the story and with the characters and the relationships that Lane had outside of these romances, like with her friends and her parents and things like that, I was still sure where this thing was going to end. And as the book went on, I was like dreading it. I was like, no, I can see where this is headed, and I can, like, I hate it. I don't want this. I don't want this to happen. And fuck, does this book take me by surprise in, like, so many ways. In so many ways, I was taken by surprise in this book. And I wouldn't particularly call any of them plot twists. This is not a twisty book. Like, it's very measured and very steady, and everything that happens, like, I feel pretty much is the logical next thing to happen in the story of this girl's life. But it still manages to shock me, which is weird. I don't know how Eva V. Gibson, I don't know how you do it. You're fantastic. As I mentioned in the trigger warning section, this book deals with a lot of mental health issues and a lot of serious life stuff. And what I really, really appreciated was that not once did these things feel trivialized. Did they feel like tools in this larger game of romance. They felt incredibly real to each of the characters that they affected. They felt so hard and so big and so overwhelming that even though I knew that this story was focused on Lane specifically, it made her world feel big and real. And I really, really appreciated that. The writing in this thing is totally gorgeous. Not overdone or overwrought, but just beautiful enough for the sort of tragic beauty that is happening in the story. There were tons of just really well-crafted sentences, really beautiful turns of phrase. I loved the writing. Even in the slower parts of the story where maybe like not quite as much was happening, I was still super engaged because every sentence just felt perfect, felt tight. I loved it. One thing I was kind of surprised by was how good this book was at making me feel uncomfortable, but in the way that you were supposed to feel uncomfortable. I feel uncomfortable a lot reading books, especially YA books, because there's a lot of toxic crap that happens in YA sometimes. And there is no shortage of toxic crap that happens in this book. People treat each other not kindly a lot of the time, but you're supposed to hate it. You are supposed to have it crawl in your skin. You're supposed to feel like you just want to walk away and be like, this isn't good. Please stop this. Everyone stop doing what they're doing. So I liked how seriously the toxic behavior was treated, and I liked how it just felt gross when it was happening, and it felt like a relief when things were resolved, when good conversations were had, when, you know, any conversation was had. Honestly, there was lots of lacking communication in this book, but when those problems got patched over and when people started to heal, you felt that relief just as much as the characters did, and that's really hard to do, so great job. I will say I hate this cover. I don't know if you can see it. I don't like it. It feels very boring, and it feels very like teen drama in a way that I don't think does this book justice. I don't know, it feels corny, and this is not a corny book. This is a really serious book. It's a really heavy book. And yeah, it does have kissing in it and sex in it, but I don't know, I don't think that's what it's about. So by putting it on the cover, I think it's a bit of a, I guess you say, false advertisement, because if I were to pick this book up, I would not be reading the thing I thought I was reading, even by reading the back. That being said, if you are looking for a romance story, this isn't a bad one. It's a very good romance, and I, for one, am happy with the place where Lane ended up, but I don't I wouldn't read this for a fluffy romance, because it is not a fluffy romance. It is I wouldn't call it tragic, but I would call it difficult, and I would call it painful, and I would call it scary, and I would call it hard, in a way that romance sometimes is really hard, but also worth the challenge. Maybe that's what I'm trying to say, is there are lots of challenges in this book, but one of the themes or one of the messages is sometimes the hard stuff is worth it. And I liked that. I liked the way it came across on the page. I do want to reiterate once again that if you find yourself triggered by any of the things mentioned previously, you may not want to read this book, or you may want to read it in teensy doses. Gibson does not pull any punches when she talks about these things. She talks about them in, I wouldn't say graphic detail. I mean, in some cases, yes, graphic detail, but also just really plainly, like what these characters are thinking, what they're feeling, what they're scared of, what haunts them. And so you might find yourself in a really uncomfortable position if you are also triggered by those things. So just kind of think carefully about if you're in a space to read about these things. If I had to say my favorite part of this book, it's when Lane's father is relieved that Connor is an atheist and not like a religious fundamentalist. I thought that was very funny and also very me as a parent. If I had to describe how I felt reading this in one word, I think it would be breathless. I felt very much like always trying to catch my breath, always trying to keep inside my body, because it was a very out-of-body experience. I mean, Lane spends a lot of her time feeling very out of her body as well, so it makes sense. But it felt very much like I was always on the edge of something, or that Lane was always on the edge of something. And if you just one more page and she would get there, or one more chapter and she would get there, and then she wouldn't, or she would, but it wouldn't be quite right. And that sort of constant low-grade tension just pervaded the book, and it made it very hard to breathe, but super, super interesting to read and super hard to put down as well. All I can say is all I knew going into this was that it was going to be about a kind of a romance thing between a girl and her stepbrother, and I was interested by that because that's not something I'd seen in YA before. But it ended up being like way, 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 way more than that. That little snippet that I had heard at YALLFest did not at all do what this book was actually about justice. So I was taken surprise by this, and I can't recommend it enough. I can't recommend this book enough. It's unique and challenging and a little weird and creative and well written and well paced, and each character is a super full, super real person. And yeah, I'm glad I read this. I loved it. 5 stars. I'm going to put a link to the Goodreads page for this book in the description below. I put a link to all of the Goodreads pages for all of the books I mentioned in my videos, so if I ever mention something and you want to know more about it, just head down to the description. The link is in there. I am very hungry and ready to get out of this work dress. So, thank you very much for watching, and I'll talk to you later. Okay, bye!